Man, one of the few negative consequences of having a baptism every other week is I turn into a blubbering mess somewhere over there, and I have to pull myself together before I come up here. But man, do you know how much of a privilege it is to be a part of a church where we get to see all this kind of stuff happen, like how cool this is. We just had a crazy blue tip and a kids festival and then fireworks, and we had thousands and thousands of people interact with our church, and we get to see somebody getting that baptism every other week and declare that Jesus is king of their life. I prayed for this for 12 years. And it's so cool to just see God move. I genuinely can't think about it too much, or you guys don't get a sermon till you just get me crying up here. So I am just so grateful that our heartbeat here is to meet people where they're at. So 2 things. I've got a really important announcement to make and a really important sermon to preach, so I got to do a bunch of stuff. But announcement. Let me introduce it. So did you know 30% of the workforce in America works on the weekends? That's a part of their rhythm. They don't have a normal Monday through Friday 9 to 5 thing. They work on the weekends, 30%. Also, newer-ish stat, probably continuing to grow, 60% of families with kids between the ages of 6 and 17 have sports that are very weekend heavy. So those 2 things together, 30% of people working, 60% of families with a bunch of sports stuff going on, that's important for us to know, right? Now let me throw one more stat at you, and we'll put these 2 things together. You know what else happens almost exclusively on the weekends? Church, right? Church services. I did a little search of all the churches in Wadsworth and around surrounding communities, and I found that 98% of church services happen between the hours of 9 and 11 on Sunday morning. There was a couple on Saturday evenings and then one that happened on Sunday evening, and that's it. Vast majority, 9 to 11 on the weekends. Now look at that together, church. 30% of people can't come to church because they're working, 60% got sports and other stuff going on, and church only happens on Sunday. Now, we can do one of 2 things with that, and we can pick, right? Option A, I will call the crotchety old man option, if you want to go with this one. We could say, we could shake our fist at culture and say, people just don't love Jesus like they used to. They need to stop putting sports on Sundays, and we could rage against it. And I could start, if you want, to preach against the evils of soccer. I'd be good at it. I've been practicing for 20 years. I'm just kidding. I always pick on soccer. I actually had somebody suggest I pick a different sport for this service, but I was like, no, it's important that it's soccer. And we could rage against it. We could complain about it and sit here. That's option A. Or second option, we could call this the Jesus option. Here I am, which one do you want to do? The old crotchety manager, the Jesus? I don't know which one you want. I'm trying to put you in a place here, but we could meet people where they're at. If 30% of the people work on weekends and 60% of families are driving to fields or mats or courts on Sunday, then let's provide another time for them to connect with God. Let's meet people where they're at on their calendars. See, Jesus didn't make people come to him. You know that? If you've read the Gospels, you know that Jesus didn't sit in Jerusalem on a mountain and say, come to me, come to me. If you really love God, you'd come to me. He didn't do that. He went out into Samaria. He went to all these different places. One of the first people he tells he's the Messiah is a woman drinking water at a time of day where she shouldn't have been drinking it. Jesus was in a place he shouldn't have been, having a conversation he shouldn't have had. He met people where they were. So it's with that heart that I'm announcing that in the fall, not yet, but in the fall, we are planning to launch a Thursday evening worship experience here at Mosaic. Thursday evening. Now, let me clarify what I mean by that. We're going to call it tentatively an early weekend worship experience because I don't want you church people to get, because see, church people are more confused by this than unchurched people. Church people are like, oh, is that like a Wednesday? So you're having another thing in the middle of the week and it's gonna be totally different? No, this is gonna be the same. Well, it's the same as it can be, right? So I'm preaching then, that would be, I'll preach on Thursdays and we'll have 2 on Sundays. So already the 2 on Sundays are different. So I'm saying they're gonna be the same. It'll probably be a little different, but not on purpose. I'm writing 1. We'll see what comes out in 3 separate times. But we'll have nursery, we'll have kids ministry. The music will be the same as we can make it. All the teams are going to adjust to whatever happens, but the heart behind it is to meet people where they are. And we care about this 30% has to work. We care about the people who have sports. And again, we can rage and be like, they should like church more than sports. Okay, cool. The other churches can have that strategy. Let's try ours. Let's meet people where they're at when it comes to their calendars. I just want to continue to apply that as much as we can. So I'm really excited about this. So a couple things, be praying about that. If you pray for this church in any way, be praying about Thursday worship experience coming in the fall. There's a lot of moving pieces behind that. You type A, people are like, well, how are we gonna, and what are we gonna? We got 74 days, exactly. So we will figure all that out. But be praying about that. And another thing I just want you to kind of just put in the back of your mind, me and Pastor Chris, our executive pastor, were talking about it, and it kind of has this feel, it's not really, but it kind of has this feel of almost like a church plant, because we're gonna be trying to reach people who normally you wouldn't reach, and we really feel like it's gonna be a different crowd of people who maybe wouldn't have been able to come like right now. So maybe you're called by God to like really be a part of that, and maybe that would be something that you would be drawn to. So just be praying about that too. If you have a heart for that kind of thing and there's a space in your calendar for that kind of thing, or maybe God wants you to make a space in your calendar for that kind of thing. So just be praying about that and considering how God wants to use that, because I really think this is going to be important for us in this city, because God's called us to that. All right. Awesome. I'm pumped about that. So to the sermon, I have been waiting to preach this sermon for like 3 months. I'm really excited about this. So if you don't know, we're in a sermon series. We're looking at the book of Psalms. Did you know that? We're in Psalms. Jonathan kicked it off last week online, and I'm continuing that this week now. So we're doing, I don't know, it's like 5 weeks. There's 150 Psalms. I don't know if you know this, if you're familiar with the book of Psalms. 150 is the biggest book in the Bible. We're not going to cover all that. We're only going to cover a couple. Now, for you, I don't know how, when I say the book of Psalms, I don't know what pops into your mind. For me, when someone says the book of Psalms, like certain things pop into my mind, like a feeling, like thanksgiving, like happiness, like good things pop into my mind when I think of the book of Psalms, like deer standing beside a stream. That's the kind of stuff that pops into my mind when I think of the book of Psalms. Happy things. If I was gonna paint the book of Psalms, I would be picking like happy colors, bright colors, pastels, neon. Like I'd pick happy things. The direction of the Psalms seems to be up by and large. Again, I don't know if that's your impression, but that's what I think of when I think of the book of Psalms. There are, however, a few Psalms that are a little different. They're not happy. There's a dark side to the Psalms. If you were painting these Psalms specifically, you would use blacks and grays and dark colors. These Psalms, the few that there are filled with angst and anger, fire and fury, pain and poison. They're dark. So dark that some Christians don't even know what to do with some of these Psalms. They don't even know what to do with them. It almost seems like these Psalms don't belong. Like if I put some of these things in front of you and didn't tell you it was in the Bible and then asked you, do you think this is in the Bible? You might just say, no, that's not in the Bible. That's horrible. Why would that be in the Bible? For real, they're that dark. But they also present, I guess, kind of a problem for us as Christians, that we need to have an answer to the problem that they create because of how dark they are. So I want to read part of one, and I think you'll see the problem start to pop pretty quickly. Now, before I jump in, I just want you to know, the reason I'm excited to preach this sermon, I think it's for people who, if you've ever had a time in your life, and maybe it's right now, where you have so many emotions, and I don't mean good ones, so much pain or so much anger or so much angst or so much frustration, so much disappointment, that you almost fill up and you don't know what to do with it. If you've ever been in a place like that, where life circumstances kind of just cause you to fill up and You don't know where to go with it all. This sermon's for you. And if you're not there, put it in your back pocket because life comes at you fast. Psalm 109, verse 1. My God, whom I praise, do not remain silent. That implies that he is, by the way. For people who are wicked and deceitful have opened their mouths against me. They have spoken against me with lying tongues. With words of hatred they surround me. They attack me without cause. In return for my friendship, they accuse me. But I'm a man of prayer. They repay me evil for good and hatred for my friendship. Whew. All right, so the writer here is a man named David. You're probably a little bit familiar with David. If you're not familiar with church, David, this is giant killer David. This is shepherd David. This is King David who wrote this psalm. Now, if you look at just these 5 verses, he kind of tells us here that he's got some enemies, right? Did you catch that? He's got some people who have wronged him, people who are lying about him, people who have betrayed him. I don't know if you caught that too. It wasn't just enemies. It was enemies that used to be friends. And that's what hurts David the most in this. How many of you know you know that the deepest wounds come from the people who are closest to you, right? If somebody's far away from you, you got an enemy who's on the outside the castle gates, that's one thing, but an enemy in the courts, that's a completely different thing. You know, getting stabbed in the front is a different feel than getting stabbed in the back. And that's what David is experiencing here. Somebody who used to be, should have been a close friend, a close relationship, and instead has now turned on him. And this is causing emotions to bubble up in him. And I want to say that resonates with me. There's hardly anything in my life that causes more pain and frustration and anger than a close relationship turning sour. And I think many of you would agree. Now, you kind of get the impression he's filling up with emotions here. So here's what he does with them. And I'm going to read just 6 through 15. I'm just going to read it straight through. And this is straight out of the Bible. This is what David says once he tells you he's got some enemies who used to be close. Here's what he prays to God. Verse 6. Appoint someone evil to oppose my enemy. Let an accuser stand at his right hand. When he's tried, let him be found guilty, and may his prayers condemn him. Okay. Verse 8. May his days be few. May another take his place of leadership. All right. May his children be fatherless, his wife a widow. May his children be wandering beggars. May they be driven from their ruined homes. May a creditor seize all he has. May strangers plunder the fruits of his labor. May no one extend kindness to him or take pity on his fatherless children. May his descendants be cut off. May their names be blotted out from the next generation. May the iniquity of the fathers be remembered before the Lord. May the sin of the mother never be blotted out. May their sins always remain before the Lord, that he may blot out their name from the earth. Ooh. That got real dark real quick, didn't it? Now I want you to imagine something. You heard all what he just said there. Imagine you come over here in church and say somehow you got over here into like a prayer circle. You know that church people do this. They stand in a circle. Sometimes they make you hold hands. It's weird. I think Jesus can hear you without holding hands, but that's fine. We can have that conversation later. But say you get in a prayer circle over here and they're praying and going around a circle, and whether or not you're comfortable doing that, that was actually one of the reasons to hold hands, because you could squeeze the person's hand to let them know that you're not going to pray, and you just kind of pass it on to the next person. Anyways, that's church stuff. So you're over here, you're in a prayer circle going around, and imagine one of the people starts praying and they pray this. Can you imagine if somebody started praying, may his days be few? And you'd be like, what? May his children become orphans. You'd be like, oh my gosh, right? May his wife be a widow. May his, did you catch, like, may their sins always remain before the Lord? You know, that's kind of the same as saying, send them to hell.
I'd like
That's a scary prayer circle to be in, right? You would know that if that happened over here, somebody, some well-meaning Christian is gonna like grab that person, take them up to the side and go, hey man, like you need counseling, 1, 2, like what are we gonna do with this? Because this sounds, if I may, wrong, right? This sounds like a wrong prayer. This sounds like David is praying wrong things, right? Because we know, if you know other parts of the Bible, we're supposed to love our enemies. We're supposed to return blessings for cursings. We're supposed to turn the other cheek, right? We're supposed to believe the best, want the best for others in our lives. But here he's praying some very different kinds of things. So he's like praying wrong things. But it's in the Bible, right? This one in particular is almost in the dead center of the Bible. So you can't really dismiss it, right? You couldn't like read Psalm 108, skip 109 and go straight to 110, right? You gotta do something with this. It kind of begs a question, right? So I want to ask, like, is it ever right to pray wrong things? Like, can we pray like this? Or can you pray like this? Could you pray like David just prayed? Can you? So, here's my hot take, maybe for you. I think that not only can you pray like this, but there are times in your life where you need to pray like this. Not all the time, probably not in a prayer circle over here off to the side out loud, but there are times where you need to pray this kind of a prayer that David prayed here in Psalm 109. I think it's vital to your spiritual health. I think it's vital to your relationship with God. You're going to need to, at times, pray some very raw, very real, very angsty, very angry, very vitriolic, fire-filled prayers. You're gonna need to, where you pour out what is inside of you before the throne of God. I want to give you 3 reasons in case you disagree. Fun little theological fact for you, just so you know. These are called, there's only like 10 to 15 of these. They're called imprecatory prayers, imprecatory psalms. So of the 150, think about that. Of the 150 psalms, about 10-ish of them are this dark, angry, angsty stuff. And I'm suggesting that this needs to be a part of your prayer life. So, 3 reasons. Here's your first one. There's this guy on Instagram. So I watch Instagram Reels. That's how I waste my life. I don't know how you do. Maybe you're cooler and you're on TikTok. I don't know. So all's Reels are what was on TikTok 3 weeks ago is now on Reels. I don't know if you know that. So I'm just a little behind. So whatever you're watching now, I'll watch later. So flipping through, again, wasting my life. And this video pops up by a guy who has an account for his septic tank cleaning business. Now, that's weird. Ask, why would he do that? I don't know. Now, if you ever watched Reels before, you know you don't like look down at what it is at first. You just watch the video, right? So I'm watching this and he's got his camera and he's just like walking through the grass and all of a sudden he comes to like a cement circle and like you're just watching because you're like, I wonder what's gonna happen, and it's got a little handle on it and he opens it up and then immediately I realize that is the inside of a septic tank, okay. Now, for you, maybe you're different than me. Maybe you would have just gotten rid of that because it's gross. I don't know why, but I couldn't look away. I couldn't. So, and I'm not gonna try and ruin your lunch to describe it in super big detail. But he only like posts the ones that are like real big problems. So he's like saying like, hey, this septic tank hasn't been cleaned out in like 15 years. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Okay, and like, again, I'm not trying to, like, he had to break some stuff up. It was like he's doing this whole thing. It's like he's like stirring it. I'm sorry, it is gross. But then like the video speeds up, and so here's the part. Like I'm like, so you judge me if you want, but listen, you drive slow by car wreck, so I'm just watching this. This is the weird. I know we're both weird in different ways. All right, so the video speeds up, and like it starts to go down. And then it's empty. And like watching that, it was like one of the, those videos that they call strangely satisfying. I'm like, it was full and now it's empty. Like there's something it felt cathartic to me to watch this. I know it's not like clean now, but like it was full and now it's empty. And for me, I was like, oh man. And now I'm wondering why in the world the algorithm picked that to put into the things that I watch. And now it's always, I see it all the time. It's great. It's a part of what it shows me. But let me suggest something. In your life, you have pain, you have disappointment, you have frustration, you have anger. There's going to be things that happen to you that are outside of your control, right? Circumstances, events that happen that cause, if I may, emotions to pour into your soul and fill it up with emotions that we could call toxic, we could call sludge, you could call them dark, whatever you want to call them, but your soul will fill up with emotions from these things that happen to you. And I believe that one of the functions of these kinds of prayers, these fiery prayers, these wrong prayers, one of the functions is to clean out your soul. It's supposed to get what is inside of you out of you. It's a cleansing thing. It is getting that stuff out because it would be really bad for it to stay in you. You get out the toxic, negative sludge that's built up in your soul. In the presence of God, God's the only one who can absorb this. Right? And you know that. Some of the stuff that goes through your mind, some of the feelings that you have, God is the only one big enough to handle that, and that's what's inside of you. And you do that. You pour it out in his presence so that you don't hold it in, because if you hold it in, the temptation then is for you to go bitter, for you to go cold, for important parts of you to stop working. Have you ever, any of y'all country folk, anybody have a septic ever back up? You know what happens? Mm-hmm. Well, the first thing you notice is the smell, right? There's like an atmosphere in your backyard, and like, why is this happening? And then all of a sudden, if you don't do anything about it, it can back up. Things can come out that should not come out. And maybe we won't make this about you. This is too dangerous to talk about you. You probably know some people who you could describe them as so full of bitterness and anger and rage that like when they get bumped into, stuff spills out of them and it's not good for anyone. There's almost a smell to it. It's toxic what comes out of them because they don't clean their soul out. And I think one of the reasons this needs to be a regular occurrence in your life is that you have this buildup of these emotions and you need to get them out, and the only place they can go is to God. And that's what David does. David prays this stuff out, and it cleanses his soul. It cleanses his soul. And I know maybe some of you are like, it just sounds like wrong, and I will tell you this, the people who probably have a problem with this, you have like a really high view of God, and that's good. I don't want to lower your view of God. If you like, man, I would never dump septic sewage out in the presence of a king, why would I do this to God? And I get that. But God's a little different kind of a king, for one. For two, what's the alternative? You want to keep that inside? You want to keep all this negativity, all this toxic, all this stuff inside of you, all the feelings that build up from the stuff that happens to you. You just want to keep it inside? You want to walk in the prayer room? You want to walk into the throne room of God and God go, how you doing? You go, I'm good. And God's like, come on now. I want to share a principle with you that is found, I think, all over the Bible. The principle is God can't heal what you hide. God can't heal what you hide. And maybe like, I don't know about that. But listen, like, think about, if you know the Bible at all, think about all the verses that talk about bringing things into the light or confessing things. Do you really think that when God says to like confess or bring things into light, he's only talking about like actions you've committed? Or do you think maybe there's an element to that where God wants you to bare your soul? Not just what you've done, but what you've thought and what you felt, to confess all of that before him, to bring all of that into light so that he can do something with it. Because newsflash, he already knows it's there anyways, right? It's kind of weird to like try and hide from God since he can see through you anyways. So you can't prevent him from knowing what you feel and think, but you can reveal it to him and allow him to heal that. And I think this is a part of that process, is you bring this sludge and he works on that. He brings healing to these places. You need to get these emotions out before God. And listen, I'm not gonna suggest that like, I think a lot of people need professional counseling. Like you need to go to somebody and they need to help walk you through emotions. But I will say, if Christians were better at this, less people would need it. I think if we got better at bearing our soul before God and getting some of this toxicity out of us, that we would walk around spilling on people less because we wouldn't have all of it inside of us anymore. But these kinds of prayers, again, this isn't an all-the-time thing. This isn't a thing you do every morning when you wake up, unless you got a really rough life. This is a thing that seasonally you get to a point where you're just like, God, I need to have a minute with you, and I just need to unleash and let all this stuff out. I think one of the things that would prevent you from doing this is like, you're like too proper. You know what I'm saying? You're too proper with God. You need to stop being proper and start being real. Pray real prayers. Real, fiery, raw prayers, because it will bring healing to your soul. That's the first reason. Second reason, and this is a little counterintuitive, the second reason I believe you need this kind of prayer in your life on a regular basis, the second reason is because I actually think that a prayer like this will bring you closer to God. I know that's weird, especially if some of you are like, wait a minute, you're telling me David praying for God to kill somebody is gonna bring David closer to God? That seems like something you're not supposed to say, and usually our instinct is if you're saying something you're not supposed to say, that would create a separation. Why does this bring a closeness? I know, it's counterintuitive. But think about it though. So for me, I'll give two examples. One's me. So I'm a pastor, and that, like, not everybody notices that. I don't have that look, I guess. So when people find out I'm a pastor, I immediately automatically get treated different. I don't know if you know that. And it's not always better, just so you know. Pastors have a weird thing going on in our culture right now. But anyways, one of the weird things that happens for me when I meet somebody and they find out I'm a pastor is many times when somebody would cuss around me, they will say sorry. It's so weird. It's so weird. And I don't know I don't know how to react to that. Like on one hand, I think like, do you think I've never heard, like I have virgin ears and you've just spoiled my, like, or am I supposed to go, you are forgiven? Like, I'm not Catholic enough for all that. I don't know. But I will tell you this. Usually that weird, when they're just kind of being themselves and a word slips out and then they go, oh, so sorry. It almost does like create this separation between me and them. I feel like I'm other now, and they're like, now we're different. There's the relationship just kind of, you know what I'm saying? It's almost like this physical recoiling. Keep that in mind. Now let me put this in your mind. So imagine you have a friend who like went through something really serious, and you have them in an environment that's like a safe environment where you know like it's not like in public, like you've got them off somewhere, and you feel like it's a good time to ask them how they're doing, and you're in this place, and you're like, hey, how you doing, man? And say they react by going, I'm fine. Now, nothing wrong with that, man. Maybe they're not okay, but wouldn't the feel in that conversation be that your relationship actually maybe kind of, there's a pulling away? Like there's not a closeness in that, right? There was almost a barrier there. They put the barrier up saying, I'm fine, when you know that's not really true. So they separated themselves out. Now, again, I'm not saying sometimes you're just not ready. Like there's nothing wrong with that, right? But you have to admit the consequence of that is a little bit of a separation in the relationship. Now, take those things and apply them to your relationship with God. When you refuse to be real, when you say you're okay when you're not, when you don't pour all out what is inside of you, doesn't that kind of create a separation between you and God? So think about the opposite. Say you're talking to this person, you say, hey man, how you doing? And they just break in front of you. And they cry, like not the pretty crying, like the ugly crying, like the snot and the spit and the whole thing. And they're telling you like, hey, this is what's happening. I'm so angry and I'm so broken. And they tell you everything. Wouldn't that do the opposite to your relationship? Wouldn't you then feel a closeness with them? That might be like a marker, like, hey, you were there for them, you got to hug them, you got to pray for them, you got to be there. And like they revealed things that were inside of them and it brought a closeness. That's what I think these prayers can do with your relationship with God. If you're real, if you really emote, you really pour out your soul before God, I actually believe it can serve as a magnet to God, that you will have a closeness to him in those moments unlike anything else. I actually think this is part of the reason why David gets called a man after God's own heart. Do you know that? If you're a church person, you know that, right? Like David is called a man after God's own heart. And it's a weird thing to call a guy like David, because David was an adulterer and a murderer and kind of a warlord to a certain extent in some parts of his life. So for somebody to be like, oh yeah, there's David, a man after God's own heart, you're like, what part of his life is that? The adultery, the murder, what is that? I think part of the reason he gets called that is because when David was hurting, when David was angry, when David was having these moments, he went to God with it. Like David and God had such a deep, close, rich, intimate relationship because there was no pretense. David was fully David in the presence of God. He did not try to dress it up. He did not try to pretend. He went to God. And in his anger, and we got to be honest about this, in his anger and pain, instead of pushing away from God, which is usually our instinct, David relentlessly went to God with this stuff. Instead of going over into a corner being like, I hate that person, I want to kill that person, he's like, hey God, can you kill him? Can you kill him, right? I mean, there was something to that though. God was like, yes. Bring that to me. And there was a closeness to that. God liked it when David was fiery and honest and real and authentic with him. It drew them together. He had a real relationship with God, not a put my best face on, not a I say I'm fine when I'm not fine, not a shallow relationship, a real deep relationship with God. So, man, I want that. I hope you want that. That's why I think these are occasionally important in your life. When you have these things happen and you have this buildup of emotion, this anger, this pain, this frustration, you need to take some time away and you need to be able to pray this stuff to God, and I think it'll draw you close. And I've said this before and I'm going to say it again. For some of you, in these kinds of prayers specifically, not all your prayers, in these real, raw, emotive, pouring your soul out to God prayers, one of the ways you will be able to tell that you're doing it right is you cuss when you pray. I know that's weird for some of you to hear. And there's always, when I say this, I think I've said it like 2 or 3 times, there's always a churchy person who hears it wrong. I can't believe Pastor told people to cuss to almighty, holy God. It's irreverent. That's the voice. That's exactly the voice they have. And I get it. Again, that comes from a place where you really want to be reverent to God. And I am all about, I want to have a high view of God. I never want to treat God like he's just like my homeboy and I just talk to him like I talk to everybody else. I get that. But in these specific prayers, when you are trying to get everything out of you that's in you, when you're trying to be as real and honest and raw with God as possible, there's not going to be a filter. So for somebody to say, Pastor Adam shouldn't tell people to cuss when they pray, I just want to say, did you not read the psalm we just read? David just asked God to just straight kill people. David just told God, make his children orphans, make his wife, just erase him from the history books. But don't say a cuss word. Okay, like really? Well, how is that? I want to say one's worse than the other. The thing I'm after here, what I'm suggesting to you is occasionally you need to pray prayers where you take all the filters off. And for some of you, that means some 4-letter words are coming out of you. And I want to say, God wants that realness. He wants all of you. He's the only one who can handle all of you. And he wants that. So that for some of you is like a test. Are you holding back? Are you keeping some parts of your heart hidden? They're not. He can still see it, but you need to reveal it to him. And I really think that will draw you and it will change your relationship with God. Because you know this, right? You know that to have a close relationship, it has to be real. It has to be real. And for some of you, you pretend you has a relationship with God, not real you. And this would be a good step in taking the filters off, and it will draw you closer to him. There's a closeness to that. So, first reason is because I think it gets the toxins out of your soul. Second reason is because I actually think it can serve to draw you closer to God. The third reason, I believe these kinds of prayers are important. Well, for this third reason, you have to remember like who David is. And if you don't know who David is he's a bad dude, okay? He was an actual giant slayer, not like figuratively, literally a giant slayer. People wrote a song about David that said he killed 10,000 people. Now that probably was an exaggeration, but in order for people to say you killed 10,000 people, how many people do you actually have to have killed? A lot, right? Like it's a lot. Like he was a Israeli super soldier. David was a bad dude. So now here, listen to this. When David prays, hey God, kill that person, he is not praying something that he is incapable of doing himself, okay? David had a list. He probably had a detailed plan, maybe multiple plans of how he could kill that person. He is a war-hardened, battle-tested, trained killer. So for David to pray, hey God, kill that person, what he's doing is he's praying it out so he doesn't live it out. Now, once you realize that, it kind of changes the whole thing, right? He's in a way handing what is inside of him to God because he doesn't want to do it himself. He's a little worried about himself. Hey, God, kill him. Because if you don't, I am fully capable. I can show you the 10 plans I have to do it. And this is a really important thing for us, to pray it out so you don't live it out. To pray it out so you don't live it out. That's your third reason. Pray it out so you don't live it out. Because if you're doing this right, if you're praying this kind of very raw, very real prayer right, you are handing this over to God. You are giving vengeance over to God. You are giving God the ability to enact justice, and you're saying, God, it's yours now. And that's part of what can happen in these prayers. That's part of why these prayers are healing, because you leave this at the throne and you're able to walk away. And now you're saying, God, I'm trusting you to have vengeance. I'm trusting you to exact justice in this situation. And maybe that's one of the things you struggle with. Part of the reason this is such a toxic buildup in your soul is because you want to react. You want to enact justice. You want to revenge on some of these people who have hurt you in your life. And maybe you're capable. You're not quite on David's level. I hope not. I hope not. But maybe you can. Maybe you're tempted to. But man, you look at David's story. You know, if you're familiar with David's story, you look at his relationship with Saul. I mean, Saul and him were close, and then they weren't. And then Saul tried to kill him unjustly many times. David had the opportunity to kill Saul. You look at a guy, that guy Nabal, he had the opportunity and the capabilities of killing Nabal. There's multiple stories in David's life where he could have taken revenge. Many people thought he should take revenge, but he didn't. And I wonder how much these prayers played a role in staying his hand. Because he was able to pray this out to God, lay it at God's feet, and trust that God was going to do what God was going to do, and he could walk free away from that. Cleansed, his soul is cleansed, he's closer to God, and he's given over vengeance, he's given over justice to God. and he walks away a different guy. Man, how awesome would that be? I wonder how much of your life and of your like emotional life could be changed if you made these kinds of prayers a regular part of your interaction with God. And maybe at first this needs to be more of a regular thing because maybe you've never done it before. And it's going to take a minute. But listen, Christian, if you're a Christian, if you put your faith and trust in Jesus and what he did on the cross, I think one of the reasons these prayers are so powerful for us, one of the reasons we should be able to have a lot of things happen to us in our life and still be able to walk straight up and still be able to walk with love and forgiveness in our hearts, is not only just like these prayers, which are a regular like practice for us, but there's an overarching belief that we have, Christian. We believe that God will one day not just make all things new, but he will make all things right. We believe that justice has a long arc, and eventually in eternity, God will make all things right. That the things that were done wrong to you will eventually be paid for. And Christian, we believe it happens in one of two places. On one hand, if the person that hurts you doesn't believe in Jesus, we believe that justice happens in hell, right? This is God's ultimate justice on a life, on an unrepentant life. Or if the person who wronged you is a Christian, man, justice is done upon the cross. Jesus took the penalty for the sin against you onto him. So for us to say vengeance is yours, God, justice is yours, is to genuinely give it to him knowing that he is going to do with it. That on a cosmic scale, he will balance it. And I don't know about you, especially the one gets me. For me to withhold like forgiveness from someone in my life, especially if they're a Christian, it's the same as like walking up to the cross of Jesus and being like, hey, there's some sin up there that I'd like to take down because I want them to pay for it instead of you. Like that to me is a sacred space that I do not want to enter. If he's paying for that sin, he's paying for it. He paid a high price for it. You should accept that payment and be able to forgive. You should. And for me, this is the ultimate release. God is not asking you to just, oh, forget it, it's cool. No, he's got it. The Lord says, vengeance is mine, I will repay. And we release that to him. And that's, for me, the ultimate in this prayer. When you pray out all the stuff inside of you, you get that toxicity out, you draw closer to God, and you give it to him, and you really do believe that he's got it now, and that he will handle justice, and you can wipe your hands and say, I trust you, I trust you, I trust you. And it's huge, it's huge. So here's what I want to do. I want to give you a couple of minutes right now to pray in church. We're going to create just a couple of moments where you can pray, and I want to suggest, now for me, to pray one of these kinds of prayers, I kind of have to be ready to do it. If you're in that place and you're ready to pray a very real, very raw prayer with God, I want to give you a space to do that. Maybe you're not. For me, I know I'm being a lot of gross today. For me, this is kind of like puking. It's a soul, you're just puking. So I'm not always ready to do that, but what I want you to do right now is maybe you know your soul has some buildup in it. You know you've got some stuff. You know you've got some anger, some frustration, some pain, some disappointment, and you know that you need to get this out. Maybe what you do right now is you pray to God and you make an appointment with him later to get this stuff out. Maybe this is the pre-prayer to crack the shell on this so that later, hey God, I need to pray. I need some extended time for this. And you start to get your soul ready to release this to him. So I just want to take a couple of minutes right now to do that. I'll start us off. Lord, I pray for the person right now who their soul is full. They know it, Lord. They can even see it in themselves when they get bumped into. It's spilling out of them. And I pray that they would take it to you. They would know that in these kinds of prayers, in a connection with you, they can be cleansed from this. I pray for the person who's nervous to be this real with you. Maybe they grew up in church and they feel like they can't just be that raw. Lord, I pray that they would know how safe you are, how big you are to take this, that you're actually the only one big enough to handle all of this, Lord. And I pray that they would be drawn to authenticity in your presence. Lord, and I pray for the person right now who's been holding on to some things that have been done to them. Oh, Lord, I pray that they would lay it at your feet right now. They'd lay it at your feet, trusting that you are a God of justice, that you are a God of love, that you will not let that thing that was done to them just be ignored. That you are holy and you are good, and that it would be so cleansing for their soul to lay it at your feet and let you have it. Oh, Lord, I pray that they would. And that they do it again tomorrow morning when they pick it back up and they have to put it down again. Lord, I pray for this church, Lord, to be a church full of people with souls that are regularly cleansed of these emotions so that we can love people like you want us to. Pray it out so we don't live it out, Lord. I pray that right now it would be a time